Hi, my name is Kari and I'm going to be your facilitator for this lecture today. And what we're going to be doing today is coordination. We're going to talk about the strategies used to combine sentences together using conjunctions and punctuation so that we can get to our compound and complex sentence structure that we need for our college academic level writing. So the first thing that we're going to start with is we're going to define what coordination is. And simple sentences, again, typically result in a choppy style and also make it difficult to express your advanced, complicated ideas that you may be discussing at the college level. So instead, what we need to try to do is to combine simple sentences together and lead into a more sophisticated style of writing. So coordination is when we join two or more complete sentences together to create this more compound, complex style of writing. Now, the first thing that you have to know is that a clause is a group of words that typically it has a subject and a verb, but may not necessarily form a complete sentence. And so that clause could be a fragment, it could be a phrase, it could be a complete sentence. So we have to be very aware of what our complete sentences look like and then how to identify our fragments and phrases so that we can fix our sentences appropriately. So for the purpose of coordination, what we're going to deal with is what is considered an independent clause. And don't let the IC fool you. IC typically makes you think that we're talking about an incomplete sentence, and the IC means incomplete, but that's not the case at all. IC here stands for independent clause, and I will use it as an abbreviation, so make sure to kind of keep aware that it is an independent clause, and it can stand alone as a simple sentence. So a compound sentence, which is what we're dealing with in coordination, a compound sentence is a sentence that's created when we use two or more independent clauses together and we join them correctly using punctuation and conjunctions according to coordination. Now, coordination is when we combine, again, two or more related independent clauses, and again, they're often simple sentences that contain ideas of equal importance, and the result is again, that compound sentence because we're dealing with two complete sentences. Now, the secret here is it does say related independent clauses. We could put a couple of complete sentences together that have nothing to do with each other. We can use coordination to try to combine them, but unfortunately it would be an incorrect sentence because the clauses are not related to each other. So the secret of this is grammatically the sentence may be correct, but ultimately it isn't because it doesn't follow the rules of conversation, that they're not related to each other. Okay. Now we have three methods of coordination. You do need to know all three. These are a little bit like math formulas, and what it is I give you the basic structure of what these sentences look like, and then you're responsible for combining them using punctuation and conjunctions as needed. So be aware that these formulas are vital. You will need to know these formulas. You need to know them well, and to be honest, you also need to know the conjunctions. So without understanding the conjunctions, without knowing the punctuation, unfortunately your sentences may be faulty and may therefore not be as conversational as you would like. So our first method, to be honest, is one of the most common methods that we have. And method one of coordination uses a comma and a coordinating conjunction to join two independent clauses. Now, what it doesn't say in this lecture is commonly our coordinating conjunctions would be what you would call your fanboys conjunctions. And many of you are familiar with your fanboys conjunctions. And your fanboys starts with the fanboys, the letters in the word, symbolizes or begins every conjunction you would use. So it would be for, and, nor, but, or, so, or yet. And so those coordinating conjunctions, you have to know them. They're a very fixed set of conjunctions, and this is why this is probably the easiest of the three methods, is because you have a very fixed group of conjunctions to choose from. So the formula would be that we have an independent clause. That first independent clause must be followed by a comma. Then we have our fanboys conjunction in the middle, also known as our coordinating conjunction. And the comma and the conjunction are sandwiched on either side by that additional independent clause. And so an example would look something like this. Excuse me, I had worked hard, comma, so I expected results. Notice that's the S out of fanboys, that's so. So I had worked hard, comma, so I expected results. So notice that these two sentences are complete on either side of our comma and so. I had worked hard. I expected results. They are both complete sentences, but we're able to combine them together using our conjunction and our so, or our conjunction and our comma. Without the conjunction or without the comma, this would be a run-on. Either a comma splice or a conjunction run-on. This would be a run-on without both of these pieces being in between these two complete sentences. Now the other thing is in order to use the comma with the conjunction, we must have a complete sentence on either side of the comma and the conjunction, and that's the secret. That's why sometimes you use a comma before a fanboys and sometimes you do not. In order to use the comma, you have to have a complete sentence on either side of the comma and the conjunction. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go on to method number 2. Method number 2 ramps it up a little bit. I mean, now we're starting to deal with a little bit more difficult construction of language here. We're dealing with a more complex conjunction and more complex punctuation. So if right now all you're really brave enough to try is a basic fanboys conjunction with a comma, by all means have at it. But if you would like to explore and start to really expand what you do with your punctuation and your conjunction, then method 2 is perfect for trying that out. So method 2 of coordination uses the semicolon, and I typically tell my students don't go anywhere near that semicolon until you're sure that you know how to use it. So this is one of the easiest and most accurate ways to use a semicolon. So you do use a semicolon here, you use an adverbial conjunction, and you use a comma to join the two independent clauses. Again, the punctuation must be correct. Adverbial conjunctions are not as a finite group of conjunctions as fanboys conjunctions. Fanboys, that's all we've got. Fanboys, that's it for those coordinating conjunctions. However, adverbial conjunctions, the list is a little bit more extensive, so you kind of have to be able to recognize them. And the easy way to understand adverbial conjunctions is that they are also words that are typically used as introductory expressions, like however, furthermore, in addition, consequently. Those are typically our adverbial conjunctions, so we can use them in the middle of a sentence to join two clauses, or we can use them as an introductory expression in front of, say, a simple sentence. That's the easy way to identify the difference between an adverbial conjunction and a fanboys conjunction. Can't typically start a sentence with a fanboys conjunction. It's just not typically acceptable. People do it all the time, but it's not completely proper. So let's look at what this formula looks like. So you'll notice again that it is similar to the first formula where we still have those independent clauses on either side of our conjunction and punctuation. They have to be complete sentences. You have to be aware of that. But notice that after that first independent clause, we do have a semicolon, we do have our adverbial conjunction, and we do have a comma. Again, you must have both pieces of punctuation. You must have a correct conjunction in the middle, and that punctuation must be placed properly. Now I'm going to use the same example. I'm just going to show you how we would use the different conjunction and punctuation to modify this example. So notice that the example is, I had worked hard, semicolon, therefore, comma, I expected results. So if I read this, it's I had worked hard, therefore I had expected results. The semicolon acts as a short pause, a little longer than the pause for a comma, but a lot less than the full stop for a period. So it's that in between, and that's why you should be able to hear two very clear relationships. The first one is I had worked hard. Second one is therefore I expected results. You should hear two very clear thoughts, but notice that they are related to each other, and that therefore and so are similar conjunctions because they show that cause and effect relationship between these two pieces of sentences. So these two sentences have to be related to each other in order to use these methods of coordination. But again, the method that we choose must be properly punctuated, and the conjunction must be correct. Now, method 3 is probably one of the most abused type of formula that we use because this is the one that Word will just toss at you whenever you do a fused run-on. So when you do a fused run-on, this is typically when you squish two complete sentences together, but you have no conjunction, you have no punctuation, and typically the computer will say run-on, and it will give you a semicolon. The problem is remember that to use coordination, especially to use any kind of punctuation for coordination, those two sentences must be related together. So if we said, my dog's name is Bo, my house is blue, those are both complete sentences. We may, for whatever reason, shove them together without any kind of punctuation, and the computer would suggest a semicolon. Grammatically, the semicolon is correct. Conversationally, it is incorrect, and therefore you can't use it. So our semicolon is our last method of coordination here, and it's the hardest one to master. And typically my rule of thumb is don't use the semicolon if you're not sure you're doing it right. So take it with caution, because semicolons can really kill you, and they can expose what you know and what you don't know. But again, in my classes, I encourage you to use it every chance you get. We do a lot of critiquing, so now is the time to try to use it and get it right and learn how to do it, rather than to try it raw in some other class. So here's our formula. Again, two complete sentences. But in between, we're just very simply using that semicolon. Remember that, again, the semicolon is a slightly longer pause than the comma, but a shorter pause than a full stop of a period. So we still want to show our reader that these two sentences are related to each other. They are related to each other. One is because of the other, but we don't feel that they need to be separate thoughts. We want them joined together. So our example here is, I had worked hard, I expected results. And now commonly, what most people do here is they just slap a comma. They say, I had worked hard, comma, I expected results. And to them it may sound correct because they did take a pause. Unfortunately, grammatically, if we're using a comma, there are specific rules for that. And in this case, the specific rule is we would need a conjunction, a fan voice conjunction. So because we don't want to maybe muck it up with a conjunction, we just want to get very clearly, this is it, then that's when we would probably use the semicolon. So we have to be careful with this because, again, the computer will often just give it to you, and you don't want to take that. You make the decision. Don't let the computer do it for you. But know that this is when you don't want to separate these two ideas, but you may not want to create that vocal pattern of a conjunction that may slow down or de-emphasize what you are trying to say as a writer. So the semicolon is the hardest to master, but the one that is so easy to understand once you learn how to use it. Okay? So that does it for our three methods of coordination. But the other added complication to coordination is not just remembering the punctuation and where the punctuation needs to go, but it's also your conjunctions. To be honest, most conjunctions have to be memorized. Remember that the easiest group of conjunctions to start with are your fan voice. And then the next group, you kind of go from there, are your adverbial conjunctions. There are more difficult conjunctions called subordinating conjunctions. We're going to talk about those in the next lecture. Those are the hardest to identify of all. Adverbial conjunctions are easily confused with the subordinating conjunctions we're going to be talking about, and that's because, again, they just seem like a bunch of long words. There doesn't necessarily seem to be rhyme or reason to them. So many of them you want to at least memorize a core group of conjunctions for each type of conjunction, and then that way you make fewer mistakes if you already have kind of that common list in your head, and then that makes it easier to identify others that you may come across. Adverbial conjunctions, remember, a lot of times the easy way to tell them apart from something like a subordinating conjunction or a fanboy conjunction is that they can often be used as introductory expressions, transitional expressions, or interruptive expressions. Our other conjunctions cannot be used that way most of the time. So this is the easy way to just kind of be able to classify adverbial conjunctions when you see them. And our subordinating conjunctions, again, which will be in the next lecture, typically include our prepositions. So we rarely ever use prepositions for our adverbial conjunctions. So be very careful. If you have a semicolon and a comma around a prepositional phrase, it's probably incorrect. And knowing the meaning of each conjunction is vital to using it properly. If you don't know where the contrast conjunctions are, if you don't know where the addition conjunctions are, if you don't know your cause and effect conjunctions, or if there's a conjunction that you want to use and you don't know what it means, unfortunately that's a major tell of where your education may be lacking. So make sure you do know your conjunctions, and as part of my particular class, I typically have a list of conjunctions that you need to define, and that's a basic list, very basic list, but knowing what these conjunctions mean are vital because they can definitely give you away. Not great to just try to put that in there without thinking it through. Okay? Well, I hope this was helpful, and I hope you enjoyed this lecture.